Men, have you set a clear standard for what you expect for your future son in law and set the same for your son if you have one? We typically ask questions like: do we as Christians support public policies that are incongruent with a biblical worldview? And if so, how would we know? Let's ask today: have we been intentional within our home, our first mission field, before we look outside of how should a biblical worldview inform our approach beyond criminal justice, education, immigration, prohibition, taxes, marriage, from a public policy standpoint? But let's also examine how we handle that within the home. Have we thoughtfully and prayerfully considered how we, the church, live out our faith? Does it match up to what we read in the New Testament? I know we're capable of critically thinking about these subjects, even if we're not an expert in a specific area. But are we thinking biblically about them? Are there consequences and contradictions that we may be unaware of? If so, how do we discover them unless we discuss them? Or is it possible that as believers with a biblical worldview, that we still need to fully consider our approach to these subjects in light of how Jesus handled the relevant situations of his day? Should we not at least consider the possibility that our approach is influenced by the world's norms and ethics more than Jesus's? And does this not hold true about marriage today and what we expect of and for our children? What do you expect of your future son-in-law? While I love my father-in-law and really appreciate both my father-in-law and mother-in-law, I have higher expectations for my son-in-law than he had for his. Today's episode of the Just a Thinker podcast is for my youngest daughter. Had I been wiser, I would have put these thoughts down more than a decade ago and shared it with my oldest. It applies to both, and it is also what I expect of my son. Listen in as I share something that our daughter can pass along to would-be suitors. It may resonate with you, and you can build upon it. Or you may find it crazy, and you want to tell me why I'm wrong, right? But most importantly, this is for my youngest daughter, so that she knows what do I expect of the young men who will come her way that want to take her out or court her or date her or eventually marry her. I don't want there to be lack of clarity. I want to make it easy for her to have a standard. And yes, I realize it'll be mostly what I model. So I admit my struggles, I admit my failures, and at the same time try to set the bar higher so that she seeks someone who is far better than myself. And that's important. There is no perfect guy out there, but we can set a standard that is what we want for our children, in this case, our daughters. All right? So we want them to be able to notice red flags and not be so caught up emotionally that they ignore them. So here's some things that are really important when considering who we date, how we date, what that even looks like. First, we have to think about, what is the purpose of dating? What is it for? In our home, we would say that dating has really one purpose, and that's we're getting ready to be married. We're going to date when we're thinking about our future and could be married in a year or two. So that means that my daughter won't be dating at 12 or 13 or 14. Doesn't mean she won't like guys and want to get to know them, but there's no need to date because the other 14 or 15-year-old isn't going to be ready to marry her in the next year or two, and certainly isn't capable of supporting her. So what is dating? It's preparation for marriage. In our view, it should involve far more talking than touching, because the intent should be to get to know the other person, to learn about them. And again, it can only end up in one of two outcomes. It's going to either end up in a breakup or marriage. That's it. A breakup or marriage. And the more we talk during this time without being physically involved, the better our chances really are of observing some red flag that may arise, and it won't be overridden by our emotions, right? We want to have our better judgment. We want to allow the Holy Spirit to work through us to help us in that process find the best possible partner. Now, I'm adamant about this with our kids, how I want my son to treat girls, because I have many regrets. Much of my dating life was done incorrectly. It was not with the best interest of the young lady I was dating. It was with my selfish, not self-interest, but my selfish desires. And I want to spare my son, and especially my daughter, that heartache that I have and that my wife has faced. So we want to give them a base from which to grow on. So here are some things that I'm going to expect to happen and questions I'm going to ask when a young man comes asking permission to date my daughter. Yes, I'm that old guy. I'm going to expect it. If you're a young man and you're man enough to date my daughter, but not man enough to ask me, you're not man enough. Other fathers, if you're raising boys who are incapable of asking a father, they're not ready to date. They're just not ready. They might think they are, but they're not. So here's some things I'm going to ask the young man. I want to ask, share your testimony with me. When did you come to know the Lord? Share that experience. They should be able to communicate what the Lord has done in their life. We should be teaching this to our children. I'm going to ask him, what small group are you part of? Tell me about the small group you're part of. Tell me about the men you're meeting with on a regular basis that are helping to shape you and mold you. And maybe those that you're mentoring along the way. There should be someone in that group that's a little younger, a guy or two that's a little older, because you should have someone who's been a little further down the road than you pulling you. You should be helping someone else along at the same time. But being part of a small group is where discipleship truly takes place, where there's accountability, where you are going in with the intent of being all that God has called you to be. And without that, you're going to have struggles. You cannot mature in your faith and mature as a man without a small group that you are part of, without men that can speak into your life, that help you grow and that you're helping others grow. So I ask those questions. Who's mentoring you and to what end? What are you looking for in a spouse? How would you provide for my daughter if you're to get married? What's your view on debt? What are your hobbies? What is it about my daughter that piques your interest that you want to get to know her better? I would even have them take various personality professional assessments. Why? Because they should know about each other. If they're going to want to get to know each other better, why not use some tools that'll help you understand someone's personality, like the DISC profile, or in a team setting, in a work setting, in a home setting, where their areas of genius are, as Patrick Lencioni would say, the 6 types of working genius. And there may be others. There's Myers-Briggs, and there's their love language. You can take the assessment to know what your love language is. Definitely read the 5 love languages, know each potential partner's love language. That's very important to do. Understanding these things will help you have a good base from which to grow from. So my expectations, they'll be part of a small group that maybe has maybe one younger guy or a little less far along than he is, perhaps 1 or 2 that are a little older that are helping them grow. Also, the dating will not look like a young man coming to my house in his mobile hotel, picking up my daughter to go to dinner or wherever. They want to go out to eat. That'll be fantastic. But there will be another couple there. We'll make sure our daughter gets there and gets home. Why? Because we're crazy? No. Because we want to set them up for the best possible chances of success and minimize their opportunity to go astray. They should be able to go to dinner and have either another couple close by. And if you can't, young man, talk to my daughter and ask her questions with either me nearby or another young adult nearby, then pretty sure that nothing you have to say will be of value. If you can't ask it in front of me, probably shouldn't ask it behind my back. I hope that he comes to the marriage debt-free, and if not, with a solid plan to be out of debt quickly. Marriage is a commitment, period. It's a commitment. Any 2 believers, you could arrange the marriage and it would work if they're committed. You see, that's crazy. Well, there are countries like India where most marriages are arranged, and you can look up the stats. The divorce rate is in single digits. I think it's less than 5% because those folks are committed. Marriage ends when one or both spouses pass from this life into the next. They have to be committed to that. Dating is not a multi-year process. Getting married younger is better than getting old, waiting till you're old to get married. You should know after a few months, actually after a few dates, a few meals together and discussions whether this person is worth pursuing or not. Doesn't mean after 2 dates you'll be ready to get married, but you should know enough to know I'm going to keep learning more about this person. But the key is talk at about 100 times the amount as you touch, because the more you talk, the more you're forced to reveal yourself, to learn about the other person. And then when red flags arise, if they do, you can walk away and remain friends because you're not physically involved. In that point, your emotions override your better judgment. So perhaps my views on this will change, but this is what we taught our son, who's about to turn 18, and he's recently graduated from high school. This is what we've laid out would be best course of action for him. You can talk to him and see if he's applying it or not, and if he wishes he was or not. For our daughter, who is 13 and will be 14 at the end of this year, this is the expectation. Baby girl, this is for you. The other people will listen to it, may be a blessing, but I put this together so that you know. And when that young man comes up and says, hey, I want to go out with you, you can just pass this, the audio version or the video version of this along, or a transcript, and say, this is the expectation. You have to talk to my dad. And these are the kind of questions he'll be asking you. So again, you might be the young man on the receiving end of this video. You might not agree with everything I say in here, and that's okay. Just come prepared to discuss it. And if I'm wrong, I'll do my best to admit it. Be prepared to argue well and hard for your ideas, but I will give it a whirl. So if you're a regular listener and you happen to stumble across this, again, if I'm off track, let me know. If you agree, tell me what part you agree with. But again, my goal, my wife's goal, is that our future son-in-law and our daughter, when they get married, will have the best chance for a wonderful marriage. It will still be hard. Marriage is difficult. You have two different people coming together to be one. That will take effort and ultimately commitment. And if the Lord is at the center of it, a threefold cord is not easily broken, as Ecclesiastes says. So we want to have those two young people and the Lord intertwined together with a lifelong commitment. And at this point, this is how we see creating the best possible circumstances for that to happen. So this is episode 7 of Just a Thinker podcast. I'm your host, Brian Butka. Thank you for listening. And baby girl, I hope this is helpful.